Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. The studio was filled with the rich odour of roses, and when the light summer winds stirred amidst the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of the lilac, or the more delicate perfume of the pink flowering thorn. From the divan on which he was lying, Lord Henry Wotton gazed at a full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty, clamped to an upright easel in the middle of the room. Some little distance away was sitting the artist himself, Basil Hallward. "It is your best work, Basil, the best you have ever done," said Lord Henry languidly. "You must certainly send it next year to the Grosvenor. The Academy is too large, too vulgar." "I don't think I shall send it anywhere," Hallward answered, tossing his head back. "No, I won't send it anywhere." Lord Henry elevated his eyebrows and looked at him in amazement through the thin blue wreaths of smoke that curled up in fanciful whirls from his heavy opium-tainted cigarette. "Not send it anywhere, my dear fellow, why? What odd chaps you painters are. You do anything in the world to gain a reputation. As soon as you have one, you seem to want to throw it away." "I know you will laugh at me," he replied, "but I really can't exhibit it. I have put too much of myself in it." Lord Henry stretched himself out on the divan and laughed. "Yes, I knew you would laugh, but it is quite true all the same. No one shall see my picture of Dorian Gray." "Dorian Gray? Is that his name?" "Yes, that is his name, and I didn't intend to tell it to you, but why not? Oh, I can't explain." The two young men went out into the garden together and ensconced themselves on a long bamboo seat that stood in the shade of a tall laurel bush. The sunlight slipped over the polished leaves. In the grass, white daisies were tremulous. After a pause, Lord Henry pulled out his watch. "I'm afraid I must be going, Basil," he murmured. "Before I go, I insist on your answering my question." "What is that?" said the painter. "I want you to explain to me why you won't exhibit Dorian Gray's picture." "Harry," said Basil Hallward, looking him straight in the face, "every portrait that is painted with feeling is a portrait of the artist, not of the sitter. The reason I will not exhibit this picture is that I am afraid that I have shown in it the secret of my own soul." Lord Henry laughed. "Oh, and what is that?" he asked. "I will tell you," said Hallward, but an expression of perplexity came over his face. "I'm all expectation, Basil," continued his companion, glancing at him. "Oh, there is really very little to tell, Harry," answered the painter. "I am afraid you will hardly understand it. Perhaps you will hardly believe it." Lord Henry smiled. "I'm quite sure I shall understand it," he replied. "And as for believing things, I can believe anything, provided that it is quite incredible." Lord Henry felt as if he could hear Basil Hallward's heart beating, and wondered what was coming. "The story is simply this," said the painter, after some time. "It was at Lady Brandon's that I saw Dorian Gray for the first time. When our eyes met, I felt that I was growing pale. A curious sensation of terror came over me. I knew that I had come face to face with someone whose mere personality was so fascinating that if I allowed it to do so, it would absorb my whole nature, my whole soul, my very art itself. I don't know how to explain it to you. Something seemed to tell me that I was on the verge of a terrible crisis in my life. I had a strange feeling that fate had in store for me exquisite joys and exquisite sorrows. I grew afraid and turned to quit the room. It was not conscience that made me do so, it was a sort of cowardice. However, whatever was my motive, I struggled to the door. There, of course, I stumbled against Lady Brandon, and she thereupon introduced me. It was simply inevitable, I am sure of that. Dorian told me afterwards that he, too, felt that we were destined to know each other." "And how did Lady Brandon describe this wonderful young man?" asked his companion. "Oh, something like, charming boy, his poor dear mother and I absolutely inseparable, quite forgot what he does, afraid he doesn't do anything, oh yes, plays the piano, or is it the violin, dear Mr. Gray. Neither of us could help laughing, and we became friends at once. Laughter is not at all a bad beginning for a friendship, and it is far the best ending for one, said the young lord. Now, tell me more about Dorian Gray. How often do you see him? Every day. I couldn't be happy if I didn't see him every day. He is absolutely necessary to me. How extraordinary! I thought you would never care for anything but your art. Well, he is all my art to me now, said the painter gravely. Basil, this is extraordinary. Mr. Dorian Gray is in the studio, sir, said the butler, coming into the garden at that moment. Oh, well, you must introduce me now, cried Lord Henry, laughing. The painter turned to Lord Henry. Dorian Gray is my dearest friend, he said. He has a simple and beautiful nature. Don't spoil him. Don't try to influence him. Your influence would be bad. The world is wide and has many marvellous people in it. Don't take away from me the one person who gives to my art whatever charm it possesses. My life as an artist depends upon him. Mind, Harry, I trust you. He spoke very deliberately, and the words seemed wrung out of him almost against his will. What nonsense you talk, said Lord Henry, smiling, and taking Hallward by the arm, he led him into the house. As they entered, they saw Dorian Gray. He was seated at the piano with his back to them, turning over the pages of a volume of Schumann's forest scenes. You must lend me these, Basil, he said. I want to learn them. They are perfectly charming. Well, that depends on how you sit today, Dorian. Oh, I'm tired of sitting, and I don't want a life-sized portrait of myself, answered the lad, swinging round on the music stool in a wilful, petulant manner. When he caught sight of Lord Henry, a faint blush coloured his cheeks for a moment, and he started up. Oh, I beg your pardon, Basil, but I didn't know you had anyone with you. This is Lord Henry Wotton, Dorian, an old Oxford friend of mine. I have just been telling him what a capital city you were. Now you've spoiled everything. You have not spoiled my pleasure in meeting you, Mr. Gray, said Lord Henry, stepping forward and extending his hand. Yes, he was certainly wonderfully handsome, with his finely curved scarlet lips, his frank blue eyes, his crisp gold hair. There was something in his face that made one trust him at once. All the candour of youth was there, as well as all youth's passionate purity. One felt that he had kept himself unspotted from the world. No wonder Basil Hallward worshipped him. Harry, I want to finish this picture today. Would you think it awfully rude of me if I asked you to go away? Lord Henry smiled and looked at Dorian Gray. Am I to go, Mr. Gray? He asked. Oh, please don't, Lord Henry. I see that Basil is in one of his sulky moods, and I can't bear him when he sulks. Hallward bit his lip. If Dorian wishes it, of course he must stay. Dorian's whims are laws to everybody except himself. And now, Dorian, get up on the platform and don't move about too much or pay any attention to what Lord Henry says. He has a very bad influence over all his friends, with the single exception of myself. Dorian Gray stepped up on the dais with the air of a young Greek martyr, and made a little moo of discontent to Lord Henry, to whom he had taken rather a fancy. After a few moments, he said to him, Have you really a very bad influence, Lord Henry? As bad as Basil said? There's no such thing as a good influence, Mr. Gray. All influence is immoral. Just turn your head a little more to the right, Dorian, like a good boy, said the painter, deep in his work, and conscious only that a look had come into the lad's face that he had never seen there before. For nearly 10 minutes Dorian Gray stood there, motionless, with parted lips and eyes strangely bright. Those few words that Basil's friend had said to him, words spoken by chance, no doubt, and with wilful paradox in them, had touched some secret chord. With his subtle smile, Lord Henry watched him. He had merely shot an arrow into the air, and it hit the mark. How fascinating the lad was. Basil, I'm tired of standing, cried Dorian Gray suddenly. I must go out and sit in the garden. The air is stifling here. My dear fellow, I'm I'm so sorry. When I'm painting, I can't think of anything else. But you never sat better. You were perfectly still, and I have caught the effect I wanted. The half-parted lips and the bright look in the eyes. Harry has certainly made you have the most wonderful expression. I will go out into the garden with you, said Lord Henry. It is horribly hot in the studio. Basil, let us have something iced to drink, something with strawberries in it. Certainly, Harry. Just touch the bell, and when Parker comes, I will tell him what you want. I've got to work up this background, so I will join you later on. Don't keep Dorian too long. I have never been in better form for painting than I am today. This is going to be my masterpiece. Oh, it is my masterpiece as it stands. Lord Henry went out to the garden and found Dorian Gray burying his face in the great cool lilac blossoms, feverishly drinking in their perfume as if it had been wine. He came close to him and put his hand upon his shoulder. "You are quite right to do that," he murmured. "Nothing can cure the soul but the senses, just as nothing can cure the senses but the soul." The lad started and drew back. There was a look of fear in his eyes, such as people have when they are suddenly awakened. "You have the most marvellous youth, Mr. Gray, and youth is the one thing worth having." "Well, I don't feel that, Lord Henry," he replied, snapping off a blossom by the stem. "No, you don't feel it now. Some day when you are old and wrinkled and ugly, when thought has seared your forehead with its lines, and passion branded your lips with its hideous fires, you will feel it. You will feel it terribly. Now, wherever you go, you charm the world. Will it always be so? You have a wonderfully beautiful face, Mr. Gray. Don't frown. You have. The gods have been good to you. But what the gods give, they quickly take away. Ah, realize your youth while you have it. Don't squander the gold of your days. Live the wonderful life that is in you, and let nothing be lost upon you. Be always searching for new sensations, afraid of nothing. With your personality, there's nothing you could not do. The world belongs to you for a season. Youth. Youth. There is absolutely nothing in the world but youth." Dorian Gray listened, open-eyed and wondering. The spray of lilac fell from his hand upon the gravel. They rose up and sauntered down the walk together. As they entered the studio, Dorian Gray put his hand upon Lord Henry's arm. Flushing at his own boldness, he then stepped up on the platform and resumed his pose. After about a quarter of an hour, Hallward stopped painting, looked for a long time at Dorian Gray, and then for a long time at the picture, biting the end of one of his huge brushes and frowning. "It is quite finished," he cried at last, and stooping down, he wrote his name in long vermilion letters on the left-hand corner of the canvas. Lord Henry came over and examined the picture. It was certainly a wonderful work of art, and a wonderful likeness as well. "My dear fellow, I congratulate you most warmly," he said. "It is the finest portrait of modern times. Mr. Gray, come over and look at yourself." Dorian made no answer, but passed listlessly in front of his picture and turned towards it. When he saw it, he drew back, and his cheeks flushed for a moment with pleasure. A look of joy came into his eyes, as if he had recognized himself for the first time. He stood there motionless and in wonder. Yes, there would be a day when his face would be wrinkled and wizen, his eyes dim and colourless. The grace of his figure broken and deformed, the scarlet would pass away from his lips and the gold steal from his hair. His eyes deepened into amethyst, and across them came a mist of tears. He felt as if a hand of ice had been laid upon his heart. "How sad it is," murmured Dorian Gray, with his eyes still fixed upon his own portrait. "How sad it is. I shall grow old and horrible and dreadful, but this picture will remain always young. It will never be older than this particular day of June. If it were only the other way, if it were I who was to be always young and the picture that was to grow old, for that, I would give everything." Yes. There's nothing in the whole world I would not give. I would give my soul for that. One afternoon, a month later, Dorian Gray was reclining in a luxurious armchair in the little library of Lord Henry's house in Mayfair. It was, in its way, a very charming room, with its high-panelled wainscoting of olive-stained oak, its cream-coloured frieze, and ceiling of raised plasterwork, and its carpet strewn with silk, long-fringed Persian rugs. Lord Henry had not yet come in. He was always late on principle, his principle being that punctuality is the thief of time. So the lad was looking rather sulky, as with listless fingers he turned over the pages of an elaborately illustrated edition of Manon Lescaut that he had found in one of the bookcases. The formal, monotonous ticking of the Louis XIV clock annoyed him. Once or twice he thought of going away. At last he heard a step outside, and the door opened. "How late you are, Harry," he murmured. "I'm afraid it is not Harry, Mr. Gray," answered a shrill voice. He glanced quickly round and rose to his feet. I beg your pardon. I thought... You thought it was my husband. It is only his wife. You must let me introduce myself. I know you quite well by your photographs. I think my husband has got 17 of them." "Oh, not 17, Lady Henry." "Well, 18, then. And I saw you with him the other night at the opera." She laughed nervously as she spoke, and watched him with her vague forget-me-not eyes. "But here is Harry. Harry, I came in to look for you, to ask you something. I forget what it was. And I found Mr. Gray here. We've had such a pleasant little chat. I'm afraid I must be going. Goodbye, Mr. Gray. Goodbye, Harry. You are dining out, I suppose? So am I. Perhaps I shall see you at Lady Thornberry's." "I dare say, my dear," said Lord Harry, shutting the door behind her, as she flitted out of the room, leaving a faint odour of frangipani. "Never marry, Dorian. Men marry because they are tired, women because they are curious. Both are disappointed." "I don't think I'm likely to marry, Henry. I'm too much in love. That is one of your aphorisms. I am putting it into practice, as I do everything that you say." "Who are you in love with?" asked Lord Henry after a pause. "With an actress," said Dorian Gray, blushing. Lord Henry shrugged his shoulders. "Well, that is rather a commonplace debut. You would not say so if you saw her, Harry." "Who is she?" "Her name is Sybil Vane." "I've never heard of her." "No one has. People will some day, however. She's a genius." "My dear boy, no woman is a genius. Women are a decorative sex. How long have you known her?" "About 3 weeks." "And where did you come across her?" "In an absurd little theatre with great flaring gas jets and gaudy playbills. You will laugh at me, I know, but I went in and paid a whole guinea for the stage box. The play was Romeo and Juliet. Romeo was a stout, elderly gentleman with corked eyebrows, a husky tragedy voice, and a figure like a beer barrel. Mercutio was almost as bad. But Juliet... Oh, Harry, imagine a girl hardly 17 years of age, with a little flower-like face, a small Greek head with plaited coils of dark brown hair, eyes that were violet wells of passion, lips that were like the petals of a rose. She was the loveliest thing I had ever seen in my life. Night after night I go to see her play. One evening she is Rosalind, and the next evening she is Imogen. I have seen her in every age and in every costume. Ordinary women never appeal to one's imagination. They are quite obvious. But an actress! How different an actress is! Harry, why didn't you tell me that the only thing worth loving is an actress? Because I have loved so many of them, Dorian. Oh, yes, horrid people with dyed hair and painted faces. Don't run down dyed hair and painted faces. There is an extraordinary charm in them sometimes, said Lord Henry. Well, I wish now I had not told you about Sybil Vane. You could not have helped telling me, Dorian. All through your life you will tell me everything you do. Yes, Harry, I believe that is true. You have a curious influence over me. If I ever did a crime, I would come and confess it to you. You would understand me. People like you, the willful sunbeams of life, don't commit crimes, Dorian. But I am much obliged for the compliment all the same. And now tell me, reach me the matches like a good boy, would you? Thanks. What are your actual relations with Sybil Vane? Dorian Gray leapt to his feet with flushed cheeks and burning eyes. Harry, Sybil Vane is sacred. It is only the sacred things that are worth touching, Dorian, said Lord Henry with a strange touch of pathos in his voice. You know her, at any rate, I suppose? Of course I know her. On the first night I was at the theatre, I made the manager take me behind the scenes after the performance and introduce me to her. She was so shy, so gentle. There is something of the child about her. Her eyes opened wide in exquisite wonder when I told her what I thought of her performance, and she seemed quite unconscious of her power. I think we were both rather nervous. The manager insisted on calling me my lord, so I had to assure Sybil that I was nothing of the kind. She said quite simply to me, "You look more like a prince. I must call you Prince Charming." Well, upon my word, Dorian, Miss Sybil knows how to pay compliments. Oh, you don't understand her, Harry. She regarded me merely as a person in a play. She knows nothing of life. She lives with her mother, a faded, tired woman who played Lady Capulet in a sort of magenta dressing wrapper on the first night. It looks as if she had seen better days. Yes, I know that look. It depresses me, murmured Lord Henry, examining his rings. But what is it to me where she came from? From her little head to her little feet, she is absolutely and entirely divine. Every night of my life I go to see her act, and every night she is more marvellous. Well, that is the reason, I suppose, that you never dine with me now. You can dine with me tonight, Dorian, can't you? He shook his head. Tonight she is Imogen, he answered, and tomorrow night she will be Juliet. When is she Sybil Vane? Never. Well, I congratulate you. Oh, how horrid you are! She is all the great heroines of the world in one. She is more than an individual. You laugh, but I tell you she is a genius. I love her, and I must make her love me. You who know all the secrets of life, tell me how to charm Sybil Vane to love me. God, Harry, how I worship her. He was walking up and down the room as he spoke. Hectic spots of red burned on his cheeks. He was terribly excited. Lord Henry watched him with a subtle sense of pleasure. How different he was now from the shy, frightened boy he had met in Basil Hallward's studio. His nature had developed like a flower, had borne blossoms of scarlet flame. Out of its secret hiding-place had crept his soul, and desire had come to meet it on the way. Henry, I want you and Basil to come with me some night and see her act. Well, what night shall we go? Let me see, today is Tuesday. Let us fix tomorrow. She plays Juliet tomorrow. All right, the Bristol at 8 o'clock, and I will get Basil. Not 8, Harry, please, 6:30. We must be there before the curtain rises. You must see her in the first act, where she meets Romeo. 6:30? Oh, what an hour. It would be like having a meat tea or reading an English novel. It must be 7. No gentleman dines before 7. Shall you see Basil between this and then, or shall I write to him? Dear Basil, I have not laid eyes on him for a week. It is rather horrid of me, as he has sent me my portrait in the most wonderful frame, specially designed by himself, and though I am a little jealous of the picture for being a whole month younger than I am, I must admit that I delight in it. Perhaps you had better write to him. I don't want to see him alone. He says things that annoy me. He gives me good advice. Lord Henry smiled. and people are very fond of giving away what they most need themselves. It is what I call the depth of generosity. Oh, Basil is the best of fellows, but he seems to me to be just a bit of a Philistine. Since I've known you, Harry, I've discovered that. And now I am off. Imogen is waiting for me. Don't forget about tomorrow. Goodbye. As he left the room, Lord Henry's heavy eyelids drooped, and he began to think. Certainly few people had ever interested him so much as Dorian Gray, and yet the lad's mad adoration for someone else caused him not the slightest pang of annoyance or jealousy. He was pleased by it. It made him a more interesting study. While Lord Henry sat dreaming on these things, a knock came to the door, and his valet entered and reminded him it was time to dress for dinner. He got up and looked out into the street. The sunset had smitten into scarlet gold the upper windows of the houses opposite. The panes glowed like plates of heated metal. The sky above was like a faded rose. He thought of his friend's young, fiery-coloured life, and wondered how it was all going to end. When he arrived home about 12:30, he saw a telegram lying on the hall table. He opened it, and found it was from Dorian Gray. It was to tell him that he was engaged to be married to Sybil Vane. Mother, I am so happy, whispered the girl, burying her face in the lap of the faded, tired-looking woman who was sitting in the one armchair that their dingy sitting-room contained. I am so happy, she repeated. And you must be happy, too. Mrs. Vane winced and put her thin hands on her daughter's head. Happy? She echoed. I'm only happy, Sybil, when I see you act. You must not think of anything but your acting. The manager has been very good to us, and we owe him money. The girl looked up and pouted. Money, Mother? She cried. What does money matter? Love is more than money. Mr. Isaacs has advanced us £50 to pay off our debts and to get a proper outfit for James. You must not forget that, Sybil. Sybil Vane tossed her head and laughed. We don't want him any more, Mother. Prince Charming rules life for us now. I love him, she said simply. Foolish child, was the parrot phrase flung in answer. The girl laughed again. Oh, let me be happy forever. My child, you are far too young to think of falling in love. Besides, what do you know of this young man? You don't even know his name. The whole thing is most inconvenient, and really, when James is going away to Australia, and I have so much to think of, I must say that you should have shown more consideration. However, if he is rich... At this moment the door opened, and a young lad with rough brown hair came into the room. He was thick-set of figure, and his hands and feet were large and somewhat clumsy in movement. He was not so finely bred as his sister. One would hardly have guessed the close relationship that existed between them. The girl ran across the room and hugged him. James Vane looked into his sister's face with tenderness. I want you to come out for a walk, Sybil. I don't suppose I shall ever see this horrid London again. I'm sure I don't want to. Oh, Jim, said Sybil, laughing. That would be nice. It is very sweet of you to let me have your last afternoon. Where shall we go? Let us go to the park. Well, I'm too shabby, he answered, frowning. Only swell people go to the park. Nonsense, Jim, she whispered, stroking the sleeve of his coat. He hesitated for a moment. Oh, very well, he said at last. But don't be too long changing. She danced out of the door. One could hear her singing as she ran upstairs. Her little feet pattered overhead. Her brother walked up and down the room 2 or 3 times. Then he turned to the still figure in the chair. Mother, are my things ready? He asked. Quite ready, James, she answered, and immediately began to complain. I hope you'll be contented, James, with your seafaring life, she said. You must remember that it is your own choice. You might have entered a solicitor's office. Solicitors are a very respectable class, and in the country often dine with the best families. I hate offices, and I hate clerks, he replied. But you're quite right, I've chosen my own life. All I say is, watch over Sybil. Don't let her come to any harm. Mother, you must watch over her. James, you really talk very strangely. Of course I'll watch over Sybil. I hear a gentleman comes every night to the theatre and goes backstage to talk to her. Is that right? What about that? You are speaking of things that you don't understand, James. In the profession, we are accustomed to receive a great deal of the most gratifying attention. I myself used to receive many bouquets at one time. That was when acting was really understood. As for Sybil, I do not know at present whether her attachment is serious or not, but there is no doubt that the young man in question is a perfect gentleman. He's always most polite to me. Besides, he has the appearance of being rich, and the flowers he sends are lovely. Yet you don't know his name, though, said the lad harshly. No, answered his mother. He's not yet revealed his real name. Sybil calls him Prince Charming. He's probably a member of the aristocracy. James Vane bit his lip. "Watch over Sybil, Mother," he cried. "Watch over her." "My son, you distress me very much. Sybil is always under my special care. Of course, if this gentleman is wealthy, there is no reason why she should not contract an alliance with him. I trust he is one of the aristocracy. He has all the appearance of it, I must say. It might be a most brilliant marriage for Sybil. They would make a charming couple. His good looks are really quite remarkable. Everybody notices them." The lad muttered something to himself, and drummed on the window-pane with his coarse fingers. Inexperienced though he was, he still had a strong sense of the danger of Sybil's position. This young dandy who was making love to her could mean her no good. He was a gentleman, and James hated him for that. Hated him through some curious race instinct for which he could not account, and which for that reason was all the more dominant within him. He was conscious also of the shallowness and vanity of his mother's nature, and in that saw infinite peril for Sybil and Sybil's happiness. "If this man wrongs my sister," he said at last, solemnly, "I will find out who he is, track him down, and kill him like a dog. I swear it." "The news, Basil," said Lord Henry that evening, as Hallward was shown into a little private room at the Bristol, where dinner had been laid for 3. "No, Harry," answered the artist, giving his hat and coat to the bowing waiter. "What is it?" "Dorian Gray is engaged to be married," said Lord Henry, watching him as he spoke. Hallward started, and then frowned. "Impossible," he cried. "It's perfectly true." "But to whom?" "To some little actress or other." "I can't believe it. Dorian is far too sensible." "Dorian is far too wise not to do foolish things now and then, my dear Basil." "Marriage is hardly a thing that one can do now and then, Harry." "Except in America," rejoined Lord Henry languidly. "But I didn't say he was married. I said he was engaged to be married. There is a great difference." "But think of Dorian's birth and position and wealth. It would be absurd for him to marry so much beneath him." "If you want to make him marry this girl, tell him that, Basil. He's sure to do it then." "I hope the girl is good, Harry." "Oh, she is better than good. Dorian says she is beautiful, and he's not often wrong about things of that kind. Your portrait of him has quickened his appreciation of the personal appearance of other people. It has had that excellent effect amongst others. We are to see her tonight, if that boy doesn't forget his appointment." "Are you serious?" "Oh, quite serious, Basil. I should be miserable if I thought I should ever be more serious than I am at the present moment." "Ah, but here is Dorian himself. He will tell you more than I can." "My dear Harry, my dear Basil, you must both congratulate me," said the lad, throwing off his evening cape with its satin-lined wings, and shaking each of his friends by the hand in turn. "I have never been so happy. Of course it is sudden, all really delightful things are, and yet it seems to me to be the one thing I have been looking for all my life." He was flushed with excitement and pleasure, and looked extraordinarily handsome. "I hope you will always be very happy, Dorian," said Hallward, "but I don't quite forgive you for not having let me know of your engagement. You let Harry know." "And I don't forgive you for being late for dinner," broke in Lord Henry, putting his hand on the lad's shoulder and smiling as he spoke. "Come, let us sit down and try what the new chef here is like, and then you will tell us how it all came about." "There is really not much to tell," cried Dorian as they took their seats at the small round table. "What happened was simply this. After I left you yesterday evening, Harry, I dressed, had some dinner, and went to the theatre. After the performance was over, I went backstage and spoke to her. As we were sitting together, suddenly there came into her eyes a look that I had never seen there before. My lips moved towards hers. We kissed each other. I can't describe to you what I felt at that moment. It seemed to me that all my life had been narrowed to one perfect point of rose-coloured joy. She trembled all over and shook like a white narcissus. Then she flung herself on her knees and kissed my hands. Oh, I feel that I should not tell you all this, but I can't help it. Of course, our engagement is a dead secret. She has not even told her own mother." Lord Henry sipped his champagne in a meditative manner. "At what particular point did you mention the word marriage, Dorian? And what did she say in answer? Perhaps you forgot all about it." "Dear Harry, I did not treat it as a business transaction, and I did not make any formal proposal. I told her that I loved her, and she said that she was not worthy to be my wife." Women are wonderfully practical," murmured Lord Henry. For some reason or other, the house was crowded that night. The youths in the gallery had taken off their coats and waistcoats and hung them over the side. They talked to each other across the theatre, and shared their oranges with the tawdry girls who sat beside them. Some women were laughing in the pit. Their voices were horribly shrill and discordant. The sound of the popping of corks came from the bar. "What a place to find one's divinity in," said Lord Henry. "Yes," answered Dorian Gray. "It was here I found her, and she is divine beyond all living things. When she acts, you will forget everything. These common rough people, with their coarse faces and brutal gestures, become quite different when she is on the stage. They sit silently and watch her. They weep and laugh, as she wills them to do. She makes them as responsive as a violin. She spiritualizes them, and one feels that they are of the same flesh and blood as oneself." "Same flesh and blood as oneself? Oh, I hope not," exclaimed Lord Henry, who was scanning the occupants of the gallery through his opera glasses. A quarter of an hour afterwards, Sybil Vane stepped onto the stage. Yes, she was certainly lovely to look at, one of the loveliest creatures, Lord Henry thought, that he had ever seen. There was something of the fawn in her shy grace and startled eyes. A faint blush, like the shadow of a rose in a mirror of silver, came to her cheeks as she glanced at the crowded, enthusiastic house. She stepped back a few paces, and her lips seemed to tremble. Basil Hallward leapt to his feet and began to applaud. Motionless as one in a dream sat Dorian Gray, gazing at her. Lord Henry peered through his glasses, murmuring, "Charming, charming." Through the crowd of ungainly, shabbily dressed actors, Sybil Vane moved like a creature from a finer world. The curves of her throat were the curves of a white lily. Her hands seemed to be made of cool ivory, yet she was curiously listless. Her words were spoken in a thoroughly artificial manner. The voice was exquisite, but from the point of view of tone it was absolutely false. It was wrong in colour. It took away all the life from the verse. It made the passion unreal. Dorian Gray grew pale as he watched her. He was puzzled and anxious. Neither of his friends dared to say anything to him. She seemed to them to be absolutely incompetent. They were horribly disappointed. Even the common, uneducated audience of the pit and gallery lost their interest in the play. They got restless and began to talk loudly and to whistle. The manager, who was standing at the back of the dress circle, stamped and swore with rage. The only person unmoved was the girl herself. When the second act was over, there came a storm of hisses, and Lord Henry got up from his chair and put on his coat. "She's quite beautiful, Dorian," he said, "but she can't act. Let's go." "Well, I'm going to see the play through," answered the lad in a hard, bitter voice. "I'm awfully sorry that I have made you waste an evening, Harry. I apologize to you both." "My dear Dorian, I should think Miss Vane is ill," interrupted Hallward. "We will come another night." "I wish she were ill," he rejoined, "but she seems to me to be simply callous and cold. She is entirely altered. Last night she was a great artist. This evening she is merely a commonplace, mediocre actress." "Don't talk like that about anyone you love, Dorian," said the painter. "Love is a more wonderful thing than art." "Go away," cried the lad. "I want to be alone. Basil, Harry, you must go. Can't you see my heart is breaking?" "Let us go, Basil," said Lord Henry, with a strange tenderness in his voice, and the two young men passed out together. The play dragged on and seemed interminable. Half of the audience went out, tramping in heavy boots and laughing. The whole thing was a fiasco. The last act was played to almost empty benches. The curtain went down on a titter, and some groans. As soon as it was over, Dorian Gray rushed behind the scenes into the green room. The girl was standing there alone, with a look of triumph on her face. Her eyes were lit with an exquisite fire. There was a radiance about her. Her parted lips were smiling over some secret of their own. "How badly I acted tonight, Dorian," she cried. "Horribly," he answered, gazing at her in amazement. "It was dreadful. Are you ill? You have no idea what it was. You have no idea what I suffered." The girl smiled. "Dorian," she answered, lingering over his name. "Dorian, you should have understood. But you understand now, don't you?" "Understand what?" he asked angrily. "Why I was so bad tonight. Why I shall always be bad. Why I shall never act well again." He shrugged his shoulders. "You are ill, I suppose." She seemed not to listen to him. She was transfigured with joy. An ecstasy of happiness dominated her. "Dorian, Dorian," she cried. "Before I knew you, acting was the one reality of my life. It was only in the theatre that I lived. I thought that it was all true. Tonight, for the first time in my life, I saw through the hollowness, the sham, the silliness of the empty pageant in which I had always played. You had made me understand what life really is. Oh, my love, Prince Charming, Prince of my life. I have grown sick of shadows. You are more to me than all art can ever be. Oh, Dorian, Dorian, you understand now what it signifies. Even if I could act again, it would be profanation for me to play at being in love. You have made me see that." He flung himself down on the sofa and turned away his face. "You have killed my love," he muttered. She looked at him in wonder and laughed. He made no answer. She came across to him and knelt down and pressed his hands to her lips. He drew them away, and a shudder ran through him. Then he leapt up and went to the door. "Yes," he cried, "you have killed my love. You used to stir my imagination. Now you don't even stir my curiosity. You simply produce no effect. I loved you because you were marvelous, because you had genius and intellect, because you realized the dreams of great poets, and gave shape and substance to the shadows of art. You have thrown it all away. You are shallow and stupid. My God, how mad I was to love you! What a fool I have been! You are nothing to me now. I will never see you again. I will never think of you. I will never mention your name." The girl grew white and trembled. Dorian, don't leave me," she whispered. A passionate sobbing choked her. She crouched on the floor like a wounded thing, and Dorian Gray, with his beautiful eyes, looked down at her, and his chiselled lips curled in exquisite disdain. "I am going," he said at last in his calm, clear voice. "I don't wish to be unkind, but I can't see you again. You have disappointed me." She wept silently and made no answer, but crept nearer. Her little hands stretched blindly out and appeared to be seeking for him. He turned on his heel and left the room. In a few moments, he was out of the theatre. Where he went, he hardly knew. He remembered wandering through dimly lit streets, past gaunt, black-shadowed archways and evil-looking houses. As the dawn was just breaking, he hailed a hansom and drove home. In the great oak-panelled entrance hall, the lights were still burning. He turned them out, and having thrown his hat and cape on the table, passed through the library towards the door of his bedroom, a large octagonal chamber on the ground floor, that in his new-born feeling for luxury he had just had decorated for himself, and hung with some curious Renaissance tapestries that had been discovered stored in a disused attic at Selby Royal, his country house. As he was turning the handle of the door, his eye fell upon the portrait Basil Hallward had painted of him. He started back as if in surprise. The face of the portrait appeared to him to be a little changed. The expression looked different. One would have said that there was a touch of cruelty in the mouth. What did it mean? He rubbed his eyes, came close to the picture, and examined it again. There were no signs of any change when he looked into the actual painting, and yet there was no doubt that the whole expression had altered. It was not a mere fancy of his own. The thing was horribly apparent. He drew a large screen right in front of the portrait, shuddering as he glanced at it. "How horrible," he murmured to himself. It was long past noon when he awoke. He sat up, and having sipped some tea, turned over his letters. One of them was from Lord Henry, and had been brought by hand that morning. He hesitated for a moment, and then put it aside. The others he opened listlessly. They contained the usual collection of cards, invitations to dinner, tickets for private views, programs of charity concerts and the like, that are showered on fashionable young men every morning during the season. As soon as he was dressed, he went into the library and sat down to a light French breakfast that had been laid out for him on a small round table close to the open window. It was an exquisite day. Suddenly his eye fell on the screen that he had placed in front of the portrait, and he shivered. Was it all true? Had the portrait really changed? The thing had to be examined, and at once. Anything would be better than this dreadful state of doubt. He got up and locked both doors. As he often remembered afterwards, and always with no small wonder, he found himself at first gazing at the portrait with a feeling of almost scientific interest. That such a change should have taken place was incredible to him, and yet it was a fact. One thing, however, he felt that it had done for him. It had made him conscious how unjust, how cruel he had been to Sybil Vane. It was not too late to make reparation for that. Suddenly there came a knock to the door, and he heard Lord Henry's voice outside. "My dear boy, I must see you. Let me in at once. I can't bear you shutting yourself up like this." He made no answer at first, but remained quite still. Then he drew the screen hastily across the picture and unlocked the door. "I am so sorry for it all, Dorian," said Lord Henry as he entered, "but you must not think too much about it." Do you mean about Sybil Vane?" asked the lad. "Yes, of course," answered Lord Henry, sinking into a chair and slowly pulling off his yellow gloves. "It is dreadful from one point of view, but it was not your fault. Tell me, did you go backstage and see her after the play was over?" "Yes." "Ah, I felt sure you had. Did you make a scene with her?" "Well, I was brutal, Harry. Perfectly brutal. But it is all right now. I am not sorry for anything that has happened. It has taught me to know myself better." "Ah, Dorian, I am so glad that you take it that way. I was afraid I would find you plunged in remorse and tearing that nice curly hair of yours." "I have got through all that," said Dorian, shaking his head and smiling. "I'm perfectly happy now. I know what conscience is to begin with. It is not what you told me it was. It is the divinest thing in us. No, don't sneer at it, Harry, any more, at least not before me. I want to be good. I can't bear the idea of my soul being hideous." "A very charming artistic basis for ethics, Dorian. I congratulate you on it, but how are you going to begin?" "By marrying Sybil Vane." "Marrying Sybil Vane?" cried Lord Henry, standing up and looking at him in perplexed amazement. "But my dear Dorian—" Yes, Harry, I know what you're going to say. Something dreadful about marriage. Don't say it. Don't ever say things of that kind to me again. 2 days ago I asked Sybil Vane to marry me. I am not going to break my word to her. She is to be my wife." "Your wife, Dorian? Didn't you get my letter? I wrote to you this morning and sent the note down by my own man." "Oh, yes, I remember, yes. I have not read it yet." "You know nothing, then?" "What do you mean?" Lord Henry walked across the room and, sitting down by Dorian Gray, took both his hands in his own and held them tightly. "Dorian," he said, "my letter, don't be frightened, was to tell you that Sybil Vane is dead." A cry of pain broke from the lad's lips, and he leapt to his feet, tearing his hands away from Lord Henry's grasp. "Dead? Sybil dead? It's not true. It is a horrible lie. How dare you say it?" "It is quite true, Dorian," said Lord Henry gravely. "It is in all the morning papers. There will have to be an inquest, of course, and you must not be mixed up in it. It was not an accident, Dorian, though it must be put in that way to the public. It seems that as she was leaving the theatre with her mother about 12:30 or so, she said she had forgotten something upstairs. They waited some time for her, but she did not come down again. They ultimately found her lying dead on the floor of her dressing-room. She had swallowed something, some dreadful thing they use at theatres. I don't know what it was, but it had either prussic acid or white lead in it. I should fancy it was prussic acid, as she seems to have died instantaneously." "Harry, oh, Harry, it is terrible," cried the lad. "Yes, it is very tragic, of course, but you must not get yourself mixed up in it." "So I have murdered Sybil Vane," said Dorian Gray, half to himself. "Murdered her as surely as if I had cut her little throat with a knife." "Indeed," rejoined his companion, "there is something to me quite beautiful about her death. I'm glad I am living in a century when such wonders happen. They make one believe in the reality of the things we all play with, such as romance, passion, and love." "Well, I was terribly cruel to her. You forget that." "Oh, I'm afraid that women appreciate cruelty, downright cruelty, more than anything else. They have wonderfully primitive instincts. We have emancipated them, but they remain slaves looking for their masters all the same. They love being dominated. I am sure you were splendid. I have never seen you really and absolutely angry, but I can fancy how delightful you looked. She has played her last part. You must think of that lonely death in a tawdry dressing-room simply as a strange, lurid fragment from some Jacobean tragedy, as a wonderful scene from Webster or Ford. The girl never really lived, and so she has never really died. To you, at least, she was always a dream, a phantom that flitted through Shakespeare's plays and left them lovelier for its presence. The moment she touched actual life, she marred it, and it marred her, and so she passed away. Mourn for Ophelia, if you like. Put ashes on your head because Cordelia was strangled. Cry out against heaven because the daughter of Brabantio died. But don't waste your tears over Sybil Vane. She was less real than they are. There was a silence. After some time, Dorian Gray looked up. "You have explained me to myself, Harry," he murmured, with something of a sigh of relief. "I felt all that you have said, but somehow I was afraid of it, and I could not express it to myself. How well you know me. But we will not talk again of what has happened. It has been a marvelous experience, that is all. I wonder if life has still in store for me anything as marvelous. Life has everything in store for you, Dorian. There is nothing that you, with your extraordinary good looks, cannot be able to do." As he was sitting at breakfast next morning, Basil Hallward was shown into the room. "I am so glad that I have found you, Dorian," he said gravely. "I called last night, and they told me you were not at home. Did you go down and see the girl's mother? Poor woman. What a state she must be in, and her only child, too. What did she say about it all?" "My dear Basil, how do I know?" murmured Dorian Gray, sipping some pale yellow wine from a delicate, gold-beaded bubble of Venetian glass, and looking dreadfully bored. "I was at the opera. Don't talk about horrid subjects. If one doesn't talk about a thing, it has never happened. I may mention that she was not the woman's only child. There is a son, a charming fellow, I believe, but he's not on the stage. He's a sailor or something. Now, tell me about yourself and what you are painting." "You went to the opera?" said Hallward, speaking very slowly, with a strained touch of pain in his voice. "You went to the opera while Sybil Vane was lying dead in some sordid lodging?" "Oh, stop, Basil. I won't hear it," cried Dorian, leaping to his feet. "You must not tell me about things. What is done is done. What is past is past." "You call yesterday the past?" "What has the actual lapse of time got to do with it? It is only shallow people who require years to get rid of an emotion. A man who is master of himself can end a sorrow as easy as he can vent a pleasure. I don't want to be at the mercy of my emotions. I want to use them, to enjoy them, and to dominate them." "Dorian, this is horrible. Something has changed you completely. You talk as if you have no heart, no pity in you. It's all Harry's influence, I can see that." The lad flushed up, and going to the window, looked out for a few moments on the green, flickering, sun-lashed garden. "I owe a great deal to Harry, Basil," he said at last. "More than I owe to you. You only taught me to be vain." "Well, I am punished for that, Dorian, or shall be some day." "I don't know what you mean, Basil," he exclaimed, turning round. "I don't know what you want. What do you want?" "I want the Dorian Gray I used to paint," said the artist sadly. "Basil," said the lad, going over to him and putting his hand on his shoulder, "you have come too late. Yesterday, when I heard that Sybil Vane killed herself—" "Killed herself? Oh, good heavens! Is there no doubt about that?" cried Hallward, looking up at him with an expression of horror. My dear Basil, surely you don't think it was a vulgar accident? Of course she killed herself. The elder man buried his face in his hands. How fearful, he muttered, and a shudder ran through him. No, said Dorian Gray. There's nothing fearful about it. It is one of the great romantic tragedies of the age. If you had come in yesterday at a particular moment, about 5:30, perhaps, or 5:45, you would have found me in tears. I suffered immensely. Then it passed away. And you are awfully unjust, Basil. You come down here to console me. That is charming of you. You find me consoled, and you are furious. How like a sympathetic person. The painter felt strangely moved. The lad was infinitely dear to him, and his personality had been the great turning point in his art. He could not bear the idea of reproaching him any more. After all, his indifference was probably merely a mood that would pass away. There was so much in him that was good, so much in him that was noble. Well, Dorian, he said at length with a sad smile, I won't speak to you again about this horrible thing after today. I only trust that your name won't be mentioned in connection with it. The inquest is to take place this afternoon. Have they summoned you? Dorian shook his head, and a look of annoyance passed over his face at the mention of the word inquest. There was something so crude and vulgar about everything of the kind. They don't know my name, he answered. But surely she did. Only my Christian name, and that I am quite sure she never mentioned to anyone. She told me once that they were all rather curious to learn who I was, and that she invariably told them my name was Prince Charming. It was pretty of her. You must do me a drawing of Sibyl, Basil. I should like to have something more of her than the memory of a few kisses and some broken, pathetic words. I will try and do something, Dorian, if it would please you, but you must come and sit to me yourself again. I can't get on without you. I can never sit to you again, Basil. It isn't possible, he exclaimed, starting back. The painter stared at him. My dear boy, what nonsense, he cried. Do you mean to say that you don't like what I did of you? Where is it? Why have you put that screen in front of it? Let me look at it. This is the best thing I've ever done. Do take the screen away, Dorian. And Hallward walked towards the corner of the room. A cry of terror broke from Dorian Gray's lips, and he rushed between the painter and the screen. Basil, he said, looking very pale, you must not look at it. I don't wish you to. Not look at my own work? You're not serious. Why shouldn't I look at it? Exclaimed Hallward, laughing. If you try to look at it, Basil, on my word of honour, I will never speak to you again as long as I live. I am quite serious. I don't offer any explanation, and you are not to ask for any, but remember, if you touch this screen, everything is over between us. Hallward was thunderstruck. He looked at Dorian Gray in absolute amazement. He had never seen him like this before. The lad was actually pallid with rage. His hands were clenched, and the pupils of his eyes were like discs of blue fire. He was trembling all over. Dorian? Don't speak! But what is the matter? Of course I won't look at it if you don't want me to, he said rather coldly. But really, it seems rather absurd that I shouldn't see my own work, and especially as I am going to exhibit it in Paris in the autumn. To exhibit it? You want to exhibit it? Exclaimed Dorian Gray, a strange sense of terror creeping over him. Was the world going to be shown his secret? Were people going to gape at the mystery of his life? That was impossible. Something, he did not know what, had to be done at once. Yes. Well, surely you can't object to that. Dorian Gray passed his hand over his forehead. There were beads of perspiration there. He felt that he was on the brink of a horrible danger. You told me a month ago that you would never exhibit it. Why have you changed your mind? He stopped suddenly, and a gleam of light came into his eyes. He remembered that Lord Henry had said to him once, half seriously and half in jest, If you want to have a strange quarter of an hour, get Basil to tell you why he won't exhibit your picture. He told me why he wouldn't, and it was a revelation to me. Yes, perhaps Basil, too, has a secret. He would ask him and try. "Basil," he said, coming over quite close and looking him straight in the face, "we have each of us a secret. Let me know yours, and I shall tell you mine. What was your reason for refusing to exhibit my picture?" The painter shuddered in spite of himself. "Let us sit down, Dorian," said the painter, looking troubled. "Let us sit down. Just answer me one question. Have you noticed in the picture something curious? Something that probably at first did not strike you, but then revealed itself to you suddenly?"
"Basil!"
cried the lad, clutching the arms of his chair with trembling hands and gazing at him with wild, startled eyes. "I see you did, but don't speak. Wait till you hear what I have to say. Dorian, from the moment I met you, your personality has had the most extraordinary influence over me. I was dominated by you. I worshipped you. One day, a fateful day, I sometimes think, I determined to paint a wonderful portrait of you. Whether it was the realism of the method or the mere wonder of your own personality, I cannot tell, but I note that as I worked it, every flake or film of colour seemed to me to reveal my secret. I grew afraid that others would know of my idolatry. I felt, Dorian, that I had told too much, that I had put too much of myself into it. Then it was that I resolved never to allow the picture to be exhibited. You must not be angry, Dorian, for what I have told you. As I said to Harry once, you have been made to be worshipped." Dorian Gray drew a long breath. The colour came back to his cheeks, and a smile played upon his lips. The peril was over. He was safe for the time. "It is extraordinary to me, Dorian," said Hallward, "that you should have seen this in the portrait. Did you really see it?" "I saw something in it," he answered. "Something that seemed to me very curious." "Well, you don't mind my looking at the thing now?" Dorian shook his head. "You must not ask that, Basil. I could not possibly let you stand in front of that picture." "You will some day, surely." "Never." "Well, perhaps you are right. Now, goodbye, Dorian. You have been the one person in my life who has really influenced my life. Whatever I've done that is good, I owe to you. You don't know what it cost to tell you all that I have told you." "My dear Basil," said Dorian, "what have you told me? Simply that you felt you admired me too much. That is not even a compliment." "It was not intended as a compliment. It was a confession. Now that I have made it, something seems to have gone out of me. Perhaps one should never put one's worship into words." "It was a very disappointing confession." "Why? What did you expect, Dorian?" "You didn't see anything else in the picture, did you? There was nothing else to see?" No, there was nothing else to see. Why do you ask?" I can't explain it to you, Basil. There is something fatal about a portrait. It has a life of its own." As the painter left the room, Dorian Gray smiled at himself. Poor Basil. How little he knew of the true reason. He sighed and touched the bell. The portrait must be hidden away at all costs. He could not run such a risk of discovery again. It had been mad of him to have allowed the thing to remain even for an hour in a room to which any of his friends had access. When his servant entered, he told him to tell the housekeeper that he wanted to see her. After a few moments, in her black silk dress, Mrs. Leaf bustled into the library. He asked her for the key of the schoolroom. "The old schoolroom, Mr. Dorian?" she exclaimed. "Why, it's full of dust. I must get it arranged and put straight before you go into it. It's not fit for you to see, sir. It's not indeed." "I don't want it put straight, Leaf. I only want the key." The old lady went over the contents of her bunch with tremulously uncertain hands. "Oh, here is the key, but you don't think of living up there, sir, and you so comfortable here." "No, no," he cried petulantly. "Thank you, Leaf, that will do." As the door closed, Dorian put the key in his pocket and looked round the room. His eyes fell on a large purple satin coverlet heavily embroidered with gold. Yes, that would serve to wrap the dreadful thing in. He took up from the couch the great purple and gold texture that covered it, and holding it in his hands, passed behind the screen. Was the face on the canvas viler than before? It seemed to him it was unchanged, and yet his loathing of it was intensified. Gold hair, blue eyes, and rose-red lips, they were all there. It was simply the expression that had altered. His own soul was looking out at him from the canvas and calling him to judgment. A look of pain came across him, and he flung the rich pall over the picture. In this fashion, he carried the picture up to the top floor of the house. He had not entered the place in more than 4 years, not indeed since he had used it first as a playroom as a child, and then as a study when he grew somewhat older. There was no other place in the house so secure from prying eyes as this. He had the key, and no one else could enter. The face painted on the canvas could grow bestial, sodden, and unclean. And what would it matter? No one could see it. He himself would not see it. Why should he watch the hideous corruption of his soul? Dorian locked the door and put the key in his pocket. On reaching the library, he found a note from Lord Henry, and beside it was a book bound in yellow paper, the cover slightly torn and the edges soiled. A copy of the St. James's Gazette had been placed on the tea-tray. Lord Henry's note was simply to say that he sent him round the evening paper and a book that might interest him, and that he would be at the club at 8:15. He opened the St. James's languidly and looked through it. A red pencil mark on the 5th page caught his eye. It drew attention to the following paragraph. Inquest on an actress. An inquest has been held this morning by the district coroner on the body of Sybil Vane, a young actress recently engaged at the Royal Theatre, Holborn. A verdict of death by misadventure was returned. He frowned, and tearing the paper in two, went across the room and flung the pieces away. How ugly it all was, and how horribly real ugliness made things. He felt a little annoyed with Lord Henry for having sent him the report. What had Dorian Gray to do with Sybil Vane's death? His eye fell on the yellow book that Lord Henry had sent him. What was it, he wondered? He flung himself into an armchair and began to turn over the leaves. After a few minutes he became absorbed. It was the strangest book that he had ever read. It seemed to him that in exquisite raiment and to the delicate sound of flutes, the sins of the world were passing in dumb show before him. Things that he had dimly dreamed of were suddenly made real to him. Things of which he had never dreamed were gradually revealed. He fell into a form of reverie, a malady of dreaming, that made him unconscious of the falling day and the creeping shadows. He read on till he could read no more. It was almost 9 o'clock before he reached the club, where he found Lord Henry sitting alone in the morning-room, looking very much bored. "I'm so sorry, Harry," he cried. "But really it is entirely your fault. That book you sent me so fascinated me that I forgot how the time was going." "Yes, I thought you would like it," replied his host, rising from his chair. "I didn't say I liked it, Harry. I said it fascinated me. There is a great difference." "Ah, you've discovered that," murmured Lord Henry. And they passed into the dining-room. For years Dorian Gray could not free himself from the influence of this book. Or perhaps it would be more accurate to say that he never sought to free himself from it. The hero of the book, in whom the romantic and the scientific temperaments were so strangely blended, became to him a kind of prefiguring type of himself, and indeed the whole book seemed to him to contain the story of his own life, written before he had lived it. But the wonderful beauty that so fascinated Basil Hallward, and many others beside him, never seemed to leave him. Even those who had the most evil things against him, and from time to time strange rumours about his mode of life crept through London and became the chatter of the clubs, even those could not believe anything to his dishonour when they saw him. He had always the look of one who had kept himself unspotted from the world. Often, on returning home from one of those mysterious and prolonged absences that gave rise to such strange conjecture among those who were his friends, or thought they were so, He himself would creep upstairs to the locked room, open the door with a key that never left him now, and stand with a mirror in front of the portrait that Basil Hallward had painted of him, looking now at the evil and aging face on the canvas, and now at the fair young face that laughed back at him from the polished glass. The very sharpness of the contrast used to quicken his sense of pleasure. He grew more and more enamoured of his own beauty, more and more interested in the corruption of his own soul. He would examine with minute care, and sometimes with a monstrous and terrible delight, the hideous lines that seared the wrinkling forehead, or crawled around the heavy sensual mouth, wondering sometimes which were the most horrible, the science of sin or the science of age. He would place his white hands beside the coarse, bloated hands of the picture, and smile. Yet he was afraid. What if it should be stolen? The mere thought made him cold with horror. Surely the world would know his secret then. Perhaps the world already suspected, for while he fascinated many, there were not a few who distrusted him. He was very nearly blackballed at a West End club, of which his birth and social position fully entitled him to become a member, and it was said that on one occasion, when he was brought by a friend into the smoking-room of the Churchill, the Duke of Berwick and another gentleman got up in a marked manner and went out. Curious stories became current about him after he had passed his 25th year. It was rumoured that he had been seen brawling with foreign sailors in a low den in the distant parts of Whitechapel, and that he consorted with thieves and coiners and knew the mysteries of their trade. Of such insolences and attempted slights he, of course, took no notice, and in the opinion of most people his frank, debonair manner, his charming, boyish smile, and the infinite grace of that wonderful youth which never seemed to leave him, were in themselves a sufficient answer to the calumnies, for so they turned them, that were circulated about him. It was remarked, however, that some of those who had been most intimate with him appeared after a time to shun him. Women who had wildly adored him and for his sake had braved all social censure were seen to grow pallid with shame or horror if Dorian Gray entered the room. It was on the 9th of November, the eve of his own 38th birthday, as he often remembered afterwards. He was walking home about 11 o'clock from Lord Henry's, where he had been dining, and was wrapped in heavy furs as the night was cold and foggy. At the corner of Grosvenor Square and South Audley Street, a man passed him in the mist, walking very fast and with the collar of his coat turned up. He had a bag in his hand. Dorian recognized him. It was Basil Hallward. A strange sense of fear, for which he could not account, came over him. He made no sign of recognition and went on quickly in the direction of his own house. But Hallward had seen him. Dorian heard him first stopping on the pavement and then hurrying after him. In a few moments his hand was on his arm. "Dorian, what an extraordinary piece of luck. I have been waiting for you in your library ever since 9 o'clock. Finally I took pity on your tired servant and told him to go off to bed, and so he let me out. I'm off to Paris by the midnight train, and I particularly wanted to see you before I left. I'm going to be out of England for 6 months. I intend to take a studio in Paris and shut myself up until I have finished a great picture I have in my head. However, it wasn't about myself I wanted to talk. Here we are at your door. Let me come in for a moment. I have something to say to you before I go." "Well, what is it all about?" cried Dorian in his petulant way, flinging himself down on the sofa. "It is about yourself," answered Hallward in a grave voice. "I think it right that you should know that the most dreadful things are being said against you in London." "I don't wish to know anything about them. I love scandals about other people, but scandals about myself don't interest me. They have not got the charm of novelty." "They must interest you, Dorian. Every gentleman is interested in his good name. One has a right to judge of a man by the effect he has over his friends. Yours seem to lose all sense of honour, of goodness, of purity. You have filled them with a madness for pleasure. They've gone down into the depths. You led them there. Yes, you led them there. And yet you can smile, as you are smiling now. And there is worse behind. I know you and Harry are inseparable, surely for that reason, if for no other. You should not have made his sister's name a byword. Take care, Basil, you go too far. I must speak, and you must listen. You shall listen. When you met Lady Gwendolen, not a breath of scandal had ever touched her. Is there a single decent woman in London who would drive with her in the park now? Why, even her children are not allowed to live with her. Then there are other stories. Stories that you have been seen creeping at dawn out of dreadful houses and slinking in disguise into the foulest dens in London. Are they true? Can they be true? When I first heard them, I laughed. I hear them now, and they make me shudder. What about your country house and the life that is led there? Dorian, you don't know what is said about you. They say that you corrupt everyone with whom you become intimate, and that it is quite sufficient for you to enter a house for shame of some kind to follow after. I don't know whether it is so or not, but it is said of you. I am told things that it seems impossible to doubt. Lord Gloucester was one of my greatest friends at Oxford. He showed me a letter that his wife had written to him when she was dying alone abroad. Your name was implicated in the most terrible confession I ever read. I told him that it was absurd, that I knew you thoroughly, and that you were incapable of anything of the kind. Know you? I wonder. Do I know you? Before I could answer that, I should have to see your soul. To see my soul? Muttered Dorian Gray, starting up from the sofa and turning almost white from fear. Yes, answered Hallward gravely, to see your soul. A bitter laugh of mockery broke from the lips of the younger man. You shall see it yourself tonight, he cried, seizing a lamp from the table. Come, it is your own handiwork. Why shouldn't you look at it? Hallward started back. Come upstairs, Basil, said Dorian Gray quietly. When they reached the top landing, Dorian set the lamp down on the floor, and taking out the key, turned it in the lock. You insist on knowing, Basil? He asked in a low voice. Yes. Well, I am delighted, he answered, smiling. Taking up the lamp, he opened the door and went in. A cold current of air passed them, and the light shot up for a moment in a flame of murky orange. He shuddered. Shut the door behind you, he whispered, as he placed the lamp on a table. Hallward glanced round him with a puzzled expression. The room looked as if it had not been lived in for years. A faded Flemish tapestry, a covered picture, and an almost empty bookcase. That was all that it seemed to contain besides a chair and a table. As Dorian Gray was lighting a half-burned candle that was standing on the mantel-shelf, he said, Perhaps you think that it is only God who sees the soul, Basil. Draw back that cover, and you will see mine. The voice that spoke was cold and cruel. You're mad, Dorian. You're playing a part, muttered Hallward, frowning. You won't? Then I must do it myself, said the young man, and he tore the cover from the picture and flung it on the ground. An exclamation of horror broke from the painter's lips as he saw in the dim light the hideous face on a canvas grinning at him. There was something in his expression that filled him with disgust and loathing. Good heavens! It was Dorian Gray's own face that he was looking at. The horror, whatever it was, had not yet entirely spoiled that marvellous beauty. There was still some gold in the thinning hair, and some scarlet on the sensual mouth. The sodden eyes had kept something of the loveliness of their blue, and the noble curves had not yet completely passed away from nostrils and throat. Yes, it was Dorian himself. But who had done it? Hallward seemed to recognize his own brushwork, and the frame was his own design. The idea was monstrous, yet he felt afraid. He seized the lighted candle and held it to the picture. In the left-hand corner was his own name, traced in long letters of bright vermilion. It was some foul parody, some infamous, ignoble satire. He had never done that. Still, it was his own picture. He knew it. His own picture. What did it mean? Why had it altered? He turned and looked at Dorian Gray with the eyes of a sick man. His mouth twitched, and his parched tongue seemed unable to articulate. He passed his hand across his forehead. It was dank with clammy sweat. The young man was leaning against the mantel-shelf, watching him with that strange expression that one sees in the faces of those who are absorbed in a play when some great artist is acting. There was neither real sorrow nor real joy. There was simply the passion of the spectator, with perhaps a flicker of triumph in his eyes. "What does this mean?" cried Hallward at last. "Years ago, when I was a boy," said Dorian Gray, "you met me, flattered me, and taught me to be vain of my good looks. One day you introduced me to a friend of yours who explained to me the wonders of youth, and you finished the portrait of me that revealed to me the wonder of beauty. In a mad moment that even now I don't know whether I regret or not, I made a wish. Perhaps you could call it a prayer." "I remember it. Oh, how well I remember it. No, the thing is impossible. The room is damp. Mildew has got into the canvas. The paints I used had some wretched mineral poison in them. I tell you, the thing is impossible." "Ah, what is impossible?" murmured the young man. "I don't believe it is my picture. This is the face of a satyr." "It is the face of my soul." "Christ! It has the eyes of a devil." "Each of us has heaven and hell in him, Basil," he replied. Hallward turned again to the portrait and gazed at it. The surface seemed to be quite undisturbed, and as he had left it. It was from within, apparently, that the foulness and horror had come. Through some strange quickening of inner life, the leprosies of sin were slowly eating the thing away. The rotting of a corpse in a watery grave was not so fearful. His hand shook, and the candle fell from its socket on the floor and lay there sputtering. He placed his foot on it and put it out. Then he flung himself into the rickety chair that was standing by the table and buried his face in his hands. "Good God, Dorian! What a lesson! What an awful lesson!" There was no answer, but he could hear the young man sobbing. "Pray, Dorian, pray," he murmured. "What is it that one was taught to say in one's boyhood? Lead us not into temptation. Forgive us our sins. Wash away our iniquities. Let us say that together. The prayer of your pride has been answered. The prayer of your repentance will be answered also. I worshipped you too much. I am punished for it. You worshipped yourself too much. We are both punished." Dorian Gray turned slowly around and looked at him with tear-dimmed eyes. "It is too late, Basil," he faltered. "It is never too late, Dorian. Let us kneel down and try. If we cannot remember a prayer, isn't there a verse somewhere? Though your sins be as scarlet, yet I will make them as white as snow. Oh, those words mean nothing to me now." "Hush! Don't say that. You have done enough evil in your life. My God! Don't you see that accursed thing leering at us?" Dorian Gray glanced at the picture, and suddenly an uncontrollable feeling of hatred for Basil Hallward came over him, as though it had been suggested to him by the image on the canvas, whispered into his ear by those grinning lips. The mad passions of a hunted animal stirred within him, and he loathed the man who was seated at the table more than in his whole life he had loathed anything. He glanced wildly around. Something glimmered on the top of a mantel. His eyes fell on it. He knew what it was. It was a knife that he had brought up some days before to cut a piece of cord, and had forgotten to take it away with him. He moved slowly towards it, passing Hallward as he did so. As soon as he got behind him, he seized it and turned round. Hallward stirred in his chair as if he was going to rise. Dorian Gray rushed at him and dug the knife into the great vein that is behind the ear, crushing the man's head down on the table and stabbing again and again. There was a stifled groan and the horrible sound of someone choking with blood. 3 times the outstretched arms shot up convulsively, waving grotesque, stiff-fingered hands in the air. He stabbed him twice more, but the man did not move. Something began to trickle on the floor. He waited for a moment, still pressing the head down. Then he threw the knife on the table and listened. He could hear nothing but the drip, drip on the threadbare carpet. He opened the door and went out on the landing. The house was absolutely quiet. No one was about. For a few seconds he stood bending over the balustrade and peering down into the black, seething well of darkness. Then he took out the key and locked the door behind him. He crept quietly downstairs. The woodwork creaked and seemed to cry out as if in pain. He stopped several times and waited. No, everything was still. It was merely the sound of his own footsteps. When he reached the library, he saw the bag and coat in the corner. They must be hidden away somewhere. He could easily burn them afterwards. He sat down and began to think. What evidence was there against him? Basil Hallward had left the house at 11. No one had seen him come in again. His valet had gone to bed. Paris! Yes, it was to Paris that Basil had gone, as he intended. With his curious, reserved habits, it would be months before any suspicions would be aroused. Months. Everything could be destroyed long before then. For a quarter of an hour, he walked up and down the room, biting his lip and thinking. Then he took down the blue book from one of the shelves and began to turn over the leaves. Alan Campbell, 152 Hertford Street, Mayfair. Yes, that was the man he wanted. At 9 o'clock the next morning his servant came in and opened the shutters. Dorian was sleeping quite peacefully, lying on his right side with one hand underneath his cheek. He looked like a boy who had been tired out with play or study. Gradually the events of the preceding night crept with silent, blood-stained feet into his brain, and reconstructed themselves there with terrible distinctness. He felt that if he brooded on what he had gone through, he would sicken or grow mad. When the half-hour struck, he passed his hands across his forehead, got up hastily, and dressed himself with even more than his usual care. After he had drunk his cup of black coffee, he wiped his lips slowly with a napkin, motioned to his servant to wait, and going over to the table sat down and wrote 2 letters. One he put in his pocket, the other he handed to the valet. "Take this round to 152 Hertford Street, and if Mr. Campbell is out of town, get his address." While waiting for his servant to return, he grew nervous, and a horrible fit of terror overcame him. What if Alan Campbell should be out of England? Days would elapse before he could come back. Perhaps he might refuse to come. What could he do then? Every moment was of vital importance. They had been great friends once, 5 years before, almost inseparable, indeed. Then the intimacy had come suddenly to an end. When they met in society now, it was only Dorian Gray who smiled. Alan Campbell never did. Campbell was an extremely clever young man, though he had no real appreciation of the visual arts. His dominant intellectual passion was for science. At Cambridge, he had spent a great deal of his time working in the laboratory. Indeed, he was still devoted to the study of chemistry, and had a laboratory of his own. At last the door opened, and his servant entered. "Mr. Campbell, sir," said the man. Alan Campbell walked in, looking very stern and rather pale, his pallor being intensified by his coal-black hair and dark eyebrows. "Alan, this is kind of you. I thank you for coming." "I had never intended to enter your house again, Gray, but you said it was a matter of life and death." His voice was hard and cold. He spoke with slow deliberation. There was a look of contempt in the steady, searching gaze that he turned on Dorian. He kept his hands in the pockets of his astrakhan coat, and seemed not to have noticed the outstretched hand with which he had been greeted. "Yes, it is a matter of life and death, Alan, and to more than one person. Sit down." Campbell took a chair by the table, and Dorian sat opposite to him. The 2 men's eyes met. In Dorian's there was infinite pity. He knew that what he was going to do was dreadful. After a strained moment of silence, he leaned across and told him everything, very quietly, but watching the effect of each word upon the face of him he had sent for. "Mother? Good God, Dorian! Is that what you have come to? But I will have nothing to do with it." "But you must have something to do with it. Wait! Wait a moment. Listen to me. Only listen, Alan. All I ask of you is to perform a certain scientific experiment. What I want you to do is merely to destroy the body. It is the only piece of evidence against me. If it is discovered, I am lost. And it is sure to be discovered unless you help me." "Well, I have no desire to help you. Forget that. I am simply indifferent to the whole thing. It has nothing to do with me. Alan, I entreat you. Think of the position I am in. There is no good in prolonging this scene. I absolutely refuse to do anything in the matter. It is insane of you to ask me." "You refuse?" "Yes. I entreat you, Alan. It is useless." A look of pity came into Dorian Gray's eyes. Then he stretched out his hand, took a piece of paper, and wrote something on it. He read it over twice, folded it carefully, and passed it to him. Having done this, he got up and went over to the window. Campbell looked at him in surprise, and then took up the paper and opened it. As he read it, his face became ghastly pale, and he fell back in his chair. After 2 or 3 minutes of terrible silence, Dorian turned round and came and stood behind him, putting his hand upon his shoulder. "I am so sorry for you, Alan," he murmured, "but you leave me no alternative. I have a letter written already. There it is, you see the address. If you don't help me, I must send it. You know what the result would be. But you are going to help me. It is impossible for you to refuse now." A groan broke from Campbell's lips, and he shivered all over. Dorian Gray's hand upon his shoulder weighed like a hand of lead. It was intolerable. It seemed to crush him. "Come, Alan. You must decide at once." I shall have to go home, get some things from the laboratory." "No, Alan, you must not leave the house. Write out on a sheet of notepaper what you want, and my servant will take a cab and bring the things back to you." Campbell scrawled a few lines, blotted them, and addressed an envelope to his assistant. Dorian took the note up and read it carefully. Then he rang the bell and gave it to his valet, with orders to return as soon as possible, and to bring the things with him. As the hall door shut, Campbell started nervously, and having got up from the chair, went over to the chimney-piece. He was shivering with a kind of ague for nearly 20 minutes. Neither of the men spoke, until Campbell muttered, "You are infamous, absolutely infamous." It was long after 7 when Campbell came down from the attic to the library. He was pale, but absolutely calm. "I have done what you asked me to do," he muttered. "And now goodbye. Let us never see each other again." "You have saved me from ruin, Alan. I cannot forget that," said Dorian simply. As soon as Campbell had left, he went upstairs. There was a horrible smell of nitric acid in the room, but the thing that had been sitting at the table was gone. Returning to the library, he realized there were still things that had to be destroyed. He winced. He hated the idea of even touching them, yet it had to be done. He locked the door of his library and opened the secret press into which he had thrust Basil Hallward's coat and bag. A huge fire was blazing. He piled another log on it. The smell of the singeing clothes and burning leather was horrible. It took 3/4 of an hour to consume everything. As midnight was striking, Dorian Gray, dressed commonly and with a muffler wrapped round his throat, crept quietly out of the house. In Bond Street he found a hansom with a good horse. He hailed it, and in a low voice gave the driver an address. The man shook his head. "It's too far for me," he muttered. "Here is a sovereign for you," said Dorian. "You shall have another if you drive fast." "Oh, all right, sir," answered the man. "You'll be there in an hour." And after his fare had got in, he turned his horse around and drove rapidly towards the river. The cold rain began to fall, and the blurred street lamps looked ghastly in the dripping mist. The moon hung low in the sky like a yellow skull. To cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. How the words rang in his ears. His soul certainly was sick to death. Was it true that the senses could cure it? The way seemed interminable, and the streets like the black web of some sprawling spider. After some time they left the clay road and rattled again over rough paven streets. Suddenly the man drew up with a jerk at the top of a dark lane. Over the low roofs and jagged chimney-stacks of the houses rose the black masts of ships. Wreaths of white mist clung like ghostly sails to the yards. "Somewhere about here, sir, ain't it?" he asked huskily through the trap. "This will do," Dorian answered, and having got out hastily and given the driver the extra fare he had promised him, he walked quickly in the direction of the quay. He hurried on and reached a small, shabby house that was wedged in between two gaunt factories. In one of the top windows stood a lamp. He stopped and gave a peculiar knock. After a little time he heard steps in the passage and the chain being unhooked. The door opened quietly, and he went in without saying a word. He entered a long, low room which looked as if it had once been a third-rate dancing saloon. Shrill, flaring gas jets, dulled and distorted in the fly-blown mirrors that faced them, were ranged round the walls. In one corner, with his head buried in his arms, a sailor sprawled over a table. As Dorian hurried up some rickety steps, the heavy odour of opium met him. He heaved a deep breath, and his nostrils quivered with pleasure. When he entered a small room, a young man with smooth yellow hair, who was bending over a lamp lighting a long, thin pipe, looked up at him and nodded in a hesitating manner. "So you're here, Adrian," muttered Dorian. "Where else should I be?" he answered listlessly. "None of the chaps will speak to me now." "Well, I thought you'd left England." "Darlington is not going to do anything. My brother paid the bill at last. George doesn't speak to me either. I don't care," he added with a sigh. "As long as one has this stuff, one doesn't want friends. I think I've had too many friends." Dorian winced. The presence of Adrian Singleton troubled him. He wanted to be where no one could know who he was. He wanted to escape from himself. "Come and have something to drink. I must have something." "Well, I don't want anything," murmured the young man. "Well, never mind." Adrian Singleton rose up wearily and followed Dorian to the bar. Two women sidled up and began to chatter. A crooked smile writhed across the face of one of the women. "We are very proud tonight," she sneered. "Oh, for God's sake, don't talk to me," cried Dorian, stamping his foot on the ground. He got up to leave the place. "Too good for us, are you?" she asked after him. "Prince Charming's what you like to be called, ain't it?" As she spoke, the drowsy sailor leapt to his feet and looked wildly round. He rushed out as if in pursuit. Dorian Gray hurried along the quay through the drizzling rain. His meeting with Adrian Singleton had strangely moved him, and he wondered if the ruin of that young man was really to be laid at his door, as Basil Hallward had said to him. As he darted aside into a dim archway that had served him often as a short cut to the ill-famed place where he was going, he felt himself suddenly seized from behind, and before he had time to defend himself, he was thrust back against the wall with a brutal hand around his throat. He struggled madly for life, and by a terrible effort wrenched the tightening fingers away. In a second, he heard the click of a revolver, and saw the gleam of a polished barrel pointing straight at his head, and the dusky form of a short, thick-set man facing him. "What do you want?" he gasped. "Keep quiet," said the man. "If you stir, I'll shoot you." "You are mad! What have I done to you?" "You wrecked the life of Sybil Vane," was the answer. "And Sybil Vane was my sister. She killed herself, I know it. Her death was at your door. I swore I would kill you in return. For years I've sought you. I had no clue, no trace. I knew nothing of you but the pet name she used to call you. I heard it tonight by chance. Now make your peace with God, for tonight you are going to die." Dorian Gray grew sick with fear. I never knew her," he stammered. "I never heard of her. You're mad." "You had better confess your sin, for as sure as I'm James Vane, you are going to die." There was a horrible moment. Dorian did not know what to do or say. "Now get down on your knees," growled the man. "I'll give you 1 minute to make your peace, no more. My ship leaves for India tonight, and I must do my job first. 1 minute. That's all." Dorian's arms fell to his side. Paralyzed with terror, he did not know what to do. Suddenly a wild hope flashed across his brain. "Stop!" he cried. "How long is it since your sister died? Quick, tell me." 18 years, said the man. "Why do you ask me? What do years matter?" 18 years? Laughed Dorian Gray with a touch of triumph in his voice. 18 years? Set me under the lamp and look at my face. James Vane hesitated for a moment, not understanding what was meant. Then he seized Dorian Gray and dragged him from the archway. Dim and wavering as was the wind-blown light, yet it served to show him the hideous error, as it seemed, into which he had fallen. For the face of the man he had sought to kill had all the bloom of boyhood, all the unstained purity of youth. He seemed little more than a lad of 20 summers, hardly older, if older indeed at all, than his sister had been when they had parted so many years ago. It was obvious that this was not the man who had destroyed her life. He loosened his hold and reeled back. "Oh, my God! Oh, my God!" he cried. "And I would have murdered you!" Dorian Gray drew a long breath. "You have been on the brink of committing a crime, my man," he said, looking at him sternly. "Let this be a warning to you, not to take vengeance into your own hands." Oh, forgive me, sir," muttered James Vane. I was deceived. A chance word I heard in that damned den set me on a wrong track." "You'd better go home. Put that pistol away, or you may get into trouble," said Dorian, turning on his heel and going slowly down the street. James Vane stood on the pavement in horror. He was trembling from head to foot. After a little while, a black shadow that had been creeping along the dripping wall moved out into the light and came close to him with stealthy footsteps. He felt a hand laid on his arm and looked round with a start. It was one of the women who had been drinking in the bar. "Why didn't you kill him?" she hissed out, putting her haggard face quite close to his.
"I knew you were following him when you rushed out from Darley's. You fool! You should have killed him. He's got some money and he's as bad as bad."
"Well, he's not the man I'm looking for," he answered. "And I don't want no man's money. I want a man's life. The man whose life I want must be nearly 40 now. This one is little more than a boy. Thank God I've not got his blood upon my hands." The woman gave a bitter laugh.
"Oh, little more than a boy?"
she sneered.
"Why, man, it's nigh on 18 years since Prince Charming made me what I am."
"You lie!" cried James Vane. She raised her hands up to heaven.
"Before God, I am telling the truth," she cried.
"Before God?"
"Strike me dumb if it ain't so. He is the worst one that ever comes here. They say he has sold himself to the devil for a pretty face. It's nigh on 18 years since I met him, and he hasn't changed much since then. I have, though," she added with a sickly leer. "You swear this?" "I swear it,"
came in hoarse echo from her flat mouth.
"But don't give me away to him," she whined. "I'm afraid of him, and not. Let me have some money for my night's lodging."
He broke from her with an oath and rushed to the corner of the street. Dorian Gray had disappeared. When he looked back, the woman had vanished also. A week later, Dorian Gray was sitting in the conservatory at Selby Royal, talking to the pretty Duchess of Monmouth, who, with her husband, a jaded-looking man of 60, was amongst his guests. It was tea-time, and the mellow light of the huge lace-covered lamp that stood on the table lit up the delicate china and hammered silver of the service at which the Duchess was presiding. Her white hands were moving daintily among the cups, and her full red lips were smiling at something that Dorian had whispered to her. Lord Henry was lying back in a silk-draped wicker chair looking at them. The house party consisted of 12 people, and there were more expected to arrive on the next day. "What are you two talking about?" said Lord Henry. But hardly had he finished the sentence before, from that end of the conservatory, came a stifled groan, followed by the dull sound of a heavy fall. Everybody started up. The Duchess stood motionless in horror, and, with fear in his eyes, Lord Henry rushed to his host, who was lying face downwards on the tiled floor in a death-like swoon. He was carried at once into the blue drawing-room and laid upon one of the sofas. After a short time he came to himself and looked round with a dazed expression. "What has happened?" he asked. "Oh, I remember. Am I safe here, Harry?" He began to tremble. "My dear Dorian," answered Lord Henry, "you merely fainted, that was all. You must have overtired yourself. You had better not come down to dinner. I will take your place." No, I will come down," he said, struggling to his feet. "I would rather come down. I must not be alone." He went to his room and dressed. There was a wild, reckless gaiety in his manner, but now and then a thrill of terror ran through him when he remembered that pressed against the window of the conservatory like a white handkerchief, he had seen the face of James Vane watching him. The next day he did not leave the house, and indeed spent most of the time in his own room, sick with the wild terror of dying, and yet indifferent to life itself. The consciousness of being hunted, snared, tracked down had begun to dominate him. When he closed his eyes, he saw again the sailor's face peering through the mist-stained glass, and horror seemed once more to lay its hand upon his heart. But perhaps it had only been his fancy. Sybil Vane's brother could not have come back to kill him. Why, the man did not even know who he was. After breakfast the following day, he walked with the Duchess for an hour in the garden, and then drove across the park to join the shooting party. Crisp frost lay like salt upon the grass. The sky was an inverted cup of blue metal. A thin film of ice bordered the flat reed-grown lake. At the corner of the pine-wood, he caught sight of Sir Geoffrey, the Duchess's brother, jerking 2 spent cartridges out of his gun. He jumped from the cart, and, having told the groom to take the mare home, made his way towards his guests through the withered bracken and rough undergrowth. "Have you had good sport, Geoffrey?" he asked. "Yes, not very good, Dorian. I think most of the birds have gone to the open. I dare say it'll be better after lunch when we get to the new grind." Dorian strolled along by his side. The keen, aromatic air, the brown and red lights that glimmered in the woods, the hoarse cries of the beaters ringing out from time to time, and the sharp snaps of the gun that followed, fascinated him and filled him with a sense of delightful freedom. He was dominated by the carelessness of happiness, by the high indifference of joy. Suddenly, from a lumpy tussock of old grass some 20 yards in front of them, with black-tipped ears erect and long hinder limbs throwing it forward, started a hare. It bolted for a thicket of alders. Sir Geoffrey put his gun to his shoulder, but there was something in the animal's grace of movement that strangely charmed Dorian Gray, and he cried out at once, "Don't shoot it, Geoffrey! Let it live!" "Nonsense, Dorian!" laughed his companion, and as the hare bounded into the thicket, he fired. There were 2 cries heard, the cry of a hare in pain, which is dreadful, and the cry of a man in agony, which is worse. "Oh, good heavens, I've hit a beater!" exclaimed Sir Geoffrey. "What an arse the man was to get in front of the guns! Stop shooting there!" he called out at the top of his voice. "Man is hurt!" Dorian watched them as they plunged into the alder clump, brushing the lithe, swinging branches aside. In a few moments they emerged, dragging a body after them into the sunlight. He turned away in horror. He heard Sir Geoffrey ask if the man was really dead, and the affirmative answer of the keeper, who added, "It's not one of my men, neither. Never seen him before, sir." Dorian Gray started. "Not one of your men?"
"No, sir. Seems more like a sailor to me, by his clothes."
Dorian Gray felt as if his heart had stopped beating. "A sailor!" he cried out. "Is there anything on him to identify the man?" After a brief search, the answer was returned in the negative. He resolved to see the dead man's face. He looked, and suddenly a vicious joy surged in his veins. The man who had been shot in the thicket was James Vane. He knew he was safe. "What is going on in town? I've not been to the club for days," Dorian asked his friend Lord Henry upon his return to town. "Well, the people are still discussing poor Basil's disappearance," his friend replied. "I should have thought they'd have got tired of that by this time," said Dorian, pouring himself out some wine and frowning slightly. "Oh, my dear boy, they've only been talking about it for 6 weeks. The British public are really not equal to the mental strain of having more than one topic every 3 months. They've been very unfortunate lately, however. They've had my own divorce case and Annan Campbell's suicide. Now they have the mysterious disappearance of an artist." Dorian said nothing for a while, but then asked, "Harry, did it ever occur to you that Basil was murdered?" Lord Henry yawned. "Well, Basil was very popular. Why should he be murdered? He was not clever enough to have enemies." "But don't people say that he was murdered?" "Oh, some of the papers do. It does not seem to me to be at all probable. I know that there are dreadful places in Paris, but Basil was not the sort of man to have gone to them. He had no curiosity. It was his chief defect." "What would you say, Harry, if I told you that I had murdered Basil?" said the younger man. Dorian watched him intently after he had spoken. "I would say, my dear fellow, that you are posing for a character that doesn't suit you. All crime is vulgar, just as all vulgarity is crime. It is not in you, Dorian, to commit a murder. Your appearance belies such capacity." Dorian heaved a sigh. Lord Henry continued. "Tell me, Dorian, how have you kept your youth? You must have some secret. I am only 10 years older than you are, and I am wrinkled and worn and yellow. You are really wonderful, Dorian. You have never looked more charming than you do tonight. You remind me of the day I saw you first. You were rather cheeky, very shy, and absolutely extraordinary. You have changed, of course, but not in appearance. I wish you would tell me your secret. What an exquisite life you have had. You have drunk deeply of everything, and yet you are still the same." "I'm not the same, Harry. You don't know anything about me. I think that if you did, even you would turn away from me." You laugh. Don't laugh." "You cannot change to me, Dorian," said Lord Henry. "You and I will always be friends." "Yet you poisoned me with a book once. I should not forgive that. Harry, promise me that you will never lend that book to anyone. It does harm." "My dear boy, you are really beginning to moralize. You will soon be going about like the converted and the revivalist, warning people against all the sins of which you have grown tired. You and I are what we are, and will be what we will be. As for being poisoned by a book, there's no such thing as that. Art has no influence upon action. It annihilates the desire to act. The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world in its own shame. That is all. But we won't discuss literature. I'm too tired. Come round tomorrow. I'm going to ride at 11. We might go together, and I will take you to lunch afterwards." "Very well. I will be here at 11, said Dorian. "Good night, Harry." As they parted, he hesitated for a moment, as if he had something more to say. Then he sighed and went out. It was a lovely night, so warm that he threw his coat over his arm, and did not even put his silk scarf round his throat. As he strolled home, smoking his cigarette, 2 young men in evening dress passed him. He heard one of them whisper to the other, "That is Dorian Gray." He remembered how pleased he used to be when he was pointed out or stared at or talked about. He was tired of hearing his name now. When he reached home, he found his servant waiting up for him. He sent him to bed, and threw himself down on the sofa in the library, and began to think over some of the things that Lord Henry had said to him. Was it really true that one could never change? He felt a wild longing for the unstained purity of his boyhood, his rose-white boyhood, as Lord Henry had once called it. He knew that he had tarnished himself, filled his mind with corruption, and given horror to his fancy, that he had been an evil influence to others, and had experienced a terrible joy in being so, and that, of the lives that had crossed his own, it had been the fairest and the most full of promise that he had brought to shame. But was it all irretrievable? Was there no hope for him? Ah, in what a monstrous moment of pride and passion he had prayed that the portrait should bear the burden of his days, and he keep the unsullied splendour of eternal youth. All his failure had been due to that. Better for him that each sin of his life had brought its sure, swift penalty along with it. There was purification and punishment. Not forgive us our sins, but smite us for our iniquities, should be the prayer of a man to a most just God. He took up a mirror, as he had done on that night of horror, when he had first noted the change in the fatal picture, and with wild, tear-dimmed eyes looked into its polished shield. He loathed his own beauty, and flinging the mirror to the floor, crushed it into silver splinters beneath his heel. It was his beauty that had ruined him, his beauty and the youth that he had prayed for. But for those 2 things, his life might have been free from stain. His beauty had been to him but a mask, his youth but a mockery. What was youth at best? A green and unripe time, a time of shallow moods and sickly thoughts. Why had he worn its livery? Youth had spoiled him. It was better not to think of the past. Nothing could alter that. It was of himself and of his own future that he had to think. James Vane was hidden in a nameless grave in Selby churchyard. Alan Campbell had shot himself one night in his laboratory, but had not revealed the secret that he had been forced to know. The excitement, such as it was, over Basil Hallward's disappearance would soon pass away. It was already waning. It was perfectly safe there. Nor, indeed, was it the death of Basil Hallward that waited most upon his mind. It was the living death of his own soul that troubled him. Basil had painted the portrait that had marred his life. He could not forgive him that. It was the portrait that had done everything. Basil had said things to him that were unbearable, and that he had yet borne with patience. The murder had simply been the madness of a moment. As for Alan Campbell, his suicide had been his own act. He had chosen to do it. It was nothing to do with him. A new life. That was what he wanted. That was what he was waiting for. He would never again tempt innocence. He would be good. He began to wonder if the portrait in the locked room had changed. Surely it was not still so horrible as it had been. Perhaps if his life became pure, he would be able to expel every sign of evil passion from the face. Perhaps the signs of evil had already gone away. He would go and look. He took the lamp from the table and crept upstairs. As he unbarred the door, a smile of joy flitted across his strangely young-looking face and lingered for a moment about his lips. Yes, he would be good, and the hideous thing that he had hidden away would no longer be a terror to him. He felt as if the load had been lifted from him already. He went in quietly, locking the door behind him as was his custom, and dragged the purple hanging from the portrait. A cry of pain and indignation broke from him.
He could see no change, save that in the eyes there was a look of cunning, and in the mouth the curved wrinkle of the hypocrite. The thing was still loathsome, more loathsome, if possible, than before, and the scarlet dew that spotted the hands seemed brighter and more like blood newly spilt. He trembled. Why was the red stain larger than it had been? It seemed to have crept like a horrible disease over the wrinkled fingers. There was blood on the painted feet, as though the thing had dripped blood even on the hand that had not held the knife. Did it mean that he was to confess, to give himself up, and be put to death? He laughed. He felt that the idea was monstrous. Besides, even if he did confess, who would believe him? There was no trace of the murdered man anywhere. Everything belonging to him had been destroyed. He himself had burned what had been below stairs. The world would simply say that he was mad. They would shut him up if he persisted in his story. Yet it was his duty to confess, to suffer public shame, and to make public atonement. There was a God who called upon men to tell their sins to earth as well as to heaven. Nothing that he could do would cleanse him till he had told his own sin. His sin? He shrugged his shoulders. The death of Basil Hallward seemed very little to him. It was an unjust mirror, this mirror of his soul that he was looking at. Vanity, curiosity, hypocrisy. Had there been nothing more in his renunciation of his evil ways than that? There had been something more. At least he thought so. But who could tell? No, there had been nothing more. For curiosity's sake, he had tried the denial of self. He recognized that now. But this murder, was it to dog him all his life? Was he always to be burdened by his past? Was he really to confess? Never! There was only one bit of evidence left against him, the picture itself. That was evidence. He would destroy it! Why had he kept it so long? Once it had given him pleasure to watch it changing and growing old. Of late, he had felt no such pleasure. It had kept him awake at night. When he had been away, he had been filled with terror lest other eyes should look upon it. It had brought melancholy across his passions. It had been like conscience to him. Yes, it had been conscience. He would destroy it. He looked round and saw the knife that had stabbed Basil Hallward. He had cleaned it many times till there was no stain left upon it. It was bright and glistened. As it had killed the painter, so it would kill the painter's work and all that it meant. He would kill the past, and when that was dead, he would be free. He would kill this monstrous soul-life, and without its hideous warnings, he would be at peace. He seized the thing and stabbed at the picture with it. There was a cry heard, and a crash. The cry was so horrible in its agony that the servants woke and crept out of their rooms. Two gentlemen who were passing in the square below stopped and looked up at the great house. They walked on till they met a policeman and brought him back. The constable rang the bell several times, but there was no answer. Except for a light in one of the top windows, the house was all dark. After a time he went away and stood in an adjoining portico and watched. "Whose house is that, constable?" asked the elder of the two gentlemen. "Mr. Dorian Gray, sir," answered the policeman. They looked at each other as they walked away and sneered. Inside, in the servants' part of the house, the half-clad domestics were talking in low whispers to each other. Old Mrs. Leaf was crying and wringing her hands. Victor was as pale as death. After about a quarter of an hour, he got the coachman and one of the footmen and crept upstairs. They knocked, but there was no reply. They called out. Everything was still. Finally, after vainly trying to force the door, they got on the roof and dropped down onto the balcony. The windows yielded easily. Their bolts were old. When they entered, they found hanging upon the wall a splendid portrait of their master, as they had last seen him in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty. Lying on the floor
was a dead man in evening dress with a knife in his heart. He was withered, wrinkled, and loathsome of visage. It was not till they had examined the rings that they recognized who it was.